Dr. Schultz, is there anything peculiar about our political system that empowers extremes within our parties?
There's a few different things to be thinking about here. One of them is the fact that we basically have a winner take all election system. Um, and if we think about it, it starts really at the presidential level and works all the way down. We get to elect one president of the United States. So at the end of the day, somebody wins, somebody loses. And given the fact at the presidential level, in 48 out of 50 states, it's winner take all for electoral votes. What do we have? A whole bunch of winner take alls. If you get 51% of the vote, or you get 80% of the vote, or you get 37% of the vote in a state, but it's still more than everybody else. It's winner take all. We also
If
have
I may, okay, I just want to make sure I'm following you, Dr. Schultz. So you say, for example, in a state XYZ, if it has 10 electoral votes, even if you get six, like, six of them, you get all of them, right? Is that what
you
you
get right.
mean?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's
Okay.
winner take all. We don't
Okay.
proportionally allocate them out. We have single member districts where it's basically one person gets elected from it. So we have a political system, and this is going to take me about a minute to sort of describe it here.
Please
We've got a
do.
political system that's different than parliamentary systems. Parliamentary systems like in Europe, what you have is oftentimes a system where it is um, first a national legislature or a national parliament,
Hmm.
and they have proportional representation. If you're I don't know, the red or the green party or the purple party, and you get 20% of the vote, you get 20% of the seats. So we kind of allocate it out. Here, what I want to point out to people, we don't really have a national legislature. Congress is really not a nationally elected body. The House is elected in 435 separate seats across the United States, spread across 50 states. The Senate is 100 seats distributed across 50. We really do not have one election. And where I'm going here is combine the fact that we really have a localized Congress elected from different districts. And this is the part that's so fascinating about American politics right now, is that we are so polarized that Democrats and Republicans don't like to live in the same neighborhoods. We have geographically sorted ourselves out, and thus we've created overwhelming Republican, overwhelming Democrat. We've got a few, very, very few in between. And what it's done now is take the geographic distributions, the polarization, combined with a political system that is essentially winner take all. And this is the recipe for what we're seeing right now.
Let's parse that apart. First, I'm really intrigued by your explanation of localized Congress. Um, uh, I followed closely what you said, but I want to understand a little bit better. So let's say in in the United Kingdom, each member of parliament runs in his or her own district, and she or he gets votes from that specific district. They don't get votes from the entirety of the United Kingdom, right? They are
Correct.
also local. It's kind of a localized parliament. How's that different than our local elections here in the US?
Well, well, what they have there also is because it's a parliamentary system,
Mhm.
you have to cobble together enough of your people to be able to form a majority who picks the prime minister. And so let's say the conservatives only get 30% of the vote. They have to now find another 20% to form a majority. And that's important because they are a parliamentary system, and you have to put cobble things together to form now not just a working majority in parliament, but to eventually pick the prime minister and so forth. We are a separation of power system. We can elect, as we've seen many times, we can elect one party to have the presidency. That at the end of the day, I don't get elected if I'm running in Minnesota by people who are living in Wyoming, et cetera, et cetera. Very similar to the British, but combine the localized elections with the fact that it is at the end of the day winner take all in all of those districts or all our congressional districts across the country, and the fact that it's a separation of power system. Put all those components together. That is what distinguishes us from the British system, because we are what? Again, separation of powers, not a parliamentary system.
I see. You
But I
talked.
also but I also want to come back and say that what we're experiencing in the United States is at least right now is something very, very unique in terms of the degree of polarization that overlays with geography. Now, yes, we've geography or region has been a factor, but geography now is really one of several big divides. As I tell people when I teach my American politics class, I write on the board and say that the points of conflict and division in American politics have been what? Race, class, gender, region, religion, generations, and now increasingly also education in terms of points that we divide over. And what I'm trying to capture here is that we've got a political system that was supposed to be designed for a high degree of political consensus. In fact, we had a political system that our framers were hoping that political parties would not emerge.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
the whole idea that the electoral college, the person who got the most votes would become president, runner up would be vice president, was an indication of that. The fact that George Washington in 1796, as he does his farewell, says, I worry about the rise of political parties as a problem. But we adjusted. For many, many years, we had what political scientists call coalitional political parties. There were conservatives, moderates, and liberals in each party. So now what we have, this is how I tell my students, we first have jerry-rigged political parties into a constitutional system not designed for parties. Now we are creating European-style political parties to try to operate within a political system not designed for European-style parties. That is, highly ideological parties. Put all those together, we've got a political system that's not working anywhere near what our framers had designed.
We've had intra-party conflicts in our political system forever. At what point did sort of extremism begin within political parties? Is this do different factions create extremism so that they gain followers and they gain sort of an audience and attention? Is that what's
Well,
happening?
well, what's happened here? Again, I have to do another story. Take us back 50 years ago.
Uh-huh.
And if I were to do survey research 50 years ago, let's say the 1970s, and plot American public opinion on a graph, and I want to rank public opinion from the most conservative to liberal, you know what American public opinion looked like 50 years ago? A bell curve. The vast majority of the public converged towards the center. And the two political parties, if we draw a line down the middle, we would call that the median voter. The centers of the two American political parties were very close to one another. And given the fact that the two parties were towards the center, I'm going to invoke my hero, Willie Sutton. Willie Sutton's a famous bank robber. And we was asked the question once, why do you rob banks? He said, because that's where all the money is. Willie Sutton's a genius.
That's
if
great.
if you knew 50 years ago and you were the Republican and Democratic parties and the most of the voters were in the center, what kind of candidate would you nominate for office? A centrist. Think about 1976, Jimmy Carter, Gerald Ford, both centrists. The
Yeah.
parties were close to the ideological center of the parties were close together, and the parties were ideologically mixed. Over a period of roughly 50 years, The Economist has a great graph that shows this. America has gone from a bell curve to a bimodal curve, or if people don't understand what I'm referring to, a double hump camel's back. What's happened is the two
Wait,
parties have
it's that bad?
ideologically, yes, yes, that the two parties have ideologically sorted themselves out, where we now have, by voting records in Congress, for example, the most liberal voting Republican votes more conservatively. Actually, I rephrase it. The most liberal voting Republican, I get this right there. Okay. The most conservative Democrat voting is still more liberal than the most liberal voting Republican. There's no overlap in voting anymore. American public
Wow.
basically has sorted itself out. Geographically, we have sorted ourselves out where Democrats and Republicans live in different neighborhoods, live in different districts, et cetera, et cetera. And what I'm painting here is because the parties have pushed themselves further apart and the centers are further apart, Willie Sutton is still a genius. Because fewer people identify as centrists, it doesn't make sense to nominate a candidate in the center. Instead, on the Democratic side, but certainly far more on the Republican side now, if I were to run as a centrist within my party and say, if elected, I promise to negotiate with the other side, cut deals, I'm going to get primaried from the right as a Republican or primaried from the left as a Democrat. And what it's done is help push us further and further apart over time. Because what?
Wow.
We have so few swing districts. Again, I point out to people in the 1970s, roughly 1/3, 120 out of the 435 congressional seats were swing. That is, at any given election, they could go to the left or the right, Democrat or Republican. Those swing seats were the drivers of political compromise. They forced Congress to negotiate because neither the Democrats or Republicans solidly alone could drive their agenda. You know what there is now? 30 or so swing seats in Congress. There are so few seats
Wow.
really in play that now Republicans or Democrats on their own without swings can basically drive the agenda. And what this does is it empowers the fringe. It empowers the swing. It empowers the outliers. Okay. One more story I'll tell you here. I've been telling the story several times that because we've sorted ourselves out so much, again, Democrats, Republicans live in different districts. They live in different areas, different neighborhoods. We, of course, have heard what the big split. It is what MSNBC for Democrats. It is Fox for Republicans. It's even better than that. You tell me what
Okay.
car you tell me what car you drive, I know how you're going to vote. I'll do the easy one. If you tell me you drive a Subaru, I know exactly how you're going to vote. No debate about this whatsoever. Or better yet, in the last 2 or 3 elections, best predictor of how an area is going to vote, its location proximate to Whole Foods, Chick-fil-A, or Cracker Barrel restaurants. Nearly perfect
Is this for
predictor.
real?
I am serious. I am serious. Geography, partisanship, and our consumer preferences overlay. And what I'm painting here is this is how polarized we are, how divided we are. And because of that, because party centers have moved farther and farther apart, proverbially the fringe gets to wag the dog.
Oh, wow. Wow. We'll be back after a short break to talk about super PACs and voter ID. We'll be back.